Good morning and welcome to ETM Analytics' first take of the markets. I'm joined by Director George Glynos. And George, we're heading into April this week. I actually cannot believe it, but we will have a last laugh tomorrow on the 1st, because come the 2nd, it's D-Day, of course. As Trump calls it, Liberation Day. But before we get to his latest tariff suggestions that's going to hit us, it's also D-Day in South Africa, as the National Assembly heads to Parliament to vote for the very contentious bill, the budget. There's 3 pieces of legislation with regards to the budget that they will need to get approved. But of course, there's been a lot of uncertainty on how it's going to play out, politically speaking. But has these type of uncertainties been reflected in the markets at all?
They have. We saw the currency coming under fairly significant pressure on Friday when it appeared that there wasn't a deal and that there were tensions brewing between the GNU partners, and a headline in News 24, which I've got to say struck me as a little bit sensationalist, suggested that the GNU could splinter. And I think that's a mischaracterization of how coalition politics tend to unfold. They can be messy, they can be fractious, they can be tense, but they most of the time they tend to hold together in an uncomfortable push and pull between the different partners of a coalition until they eventually settle on a position. The one thing about coalition politics is that the members of that coalition very often don't want to be seen as the party that destroyed the coalition, because the optics around that aren't particularly good. In the case of South Africa, when you consider the alternative of having the likes of the EFF or MK as part of a new coalition, that'll leave a lot of people extremely angry with the DA if they were to just back away from the GNU. So I'm not a person that believes that the GNU suddenly fails because they've had difficulties in passing the budget. I think it's democracy in action, in the sense that we are seeing some parties holding each other to account, and not just accepting the will of the ANC as it used to be the case, and pushing back and saying, no, this isn't actually good enough. You guys can do better. We need to think about these things differently. Go back to the drawing board. We'll support you. We're here to support you, but not under any circumstances. So I think this is where we're at the moment. I see this morning's headlines are significantly more positive and upbeat. And so all of a sudden, Rand is coming back and things are looking a little bit better. But, that's the nature of coalition politics, is that is going to be a lot of negotiation and pushing and pulling until such time as you settle on a middle ground that everyone can live with. It's probably the second best position, or sometimes even the third best position for each party. But that is likely to be a better outcome than just allowing the ANC unfettered ability to just pass whatever they want.
My only concern with that is that, you have, if the ANC and DA, if they don't manage to strike a deal and the ANC gets it right to shop around for votes, and they're able to pass the budget without the DA support, my only concern is that the DA will look at that, see it as egg on face, leave the GNU, and then you perhaps have less market-friendly parties that can influence and enter some sort of arrangement with the ANC. So, and I know we've been receiving a lot of questions about what's going to happen, what does the Constitution say, and the Constitution is very limited on this matter. The only thing it really helps with is through the Financial Management Act. It's just how Treasury can still deploy funds while we wait for the impasse to be broken on the budget. But other than that, there's no strong levers within the Constitution that can break a prolonged deadlock. So there's still a lot of uncertainty that we were going to have to navigate this week, and which can play out in the future. But speaking about navigating uncertainty, fresh batch of tariffs set to kick in on Wednesday, on the 2nd of April as well. And of course, everyone's concerns with this is about what is it going to do with inflation. We saw inflation expectations skyrocket last week. With the data that came out last week, we also saw that inflation is not trending downwards, perhaps as much as the Fed would like it to do. And it's really just increased the risks, the expectations of a downturn in the US economy. I see Goldman Sachs actually this past weekend, they actually increased their interest rates, cut expectations as well from 2 to 3 cuts for this year. Is that still our view, given the whole shebang playing out?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, there are many moving parts to that. The first thing I would say is that just bear in mind that the inflation expectations is a survey. So it reflects people's fears. It doesn't necessarily reflect reality. And quite often that you find that inflation expectations do not necessarily, are not necessarily a very accurate reflection of where inflation ultimately lands. You need to contrast those fears about inflation with a cyclical downturn that's underway, and that will be exacerbated by the fact that there's going to be tariffs that are imposed and retaliatory tariffs that are imposed on the US and all of that good stuff. I think a lot of people need to take a long, hard look at the mirror, because it's not as simple as just Trump being a bad person to impose tariffs. If one has a look at the kind of tariffs that Europe already imposes on the US, they're actually higher. So, this is a little bit of the pot calling the kettle black. And I think a lot of these big countries need to rethink their international trade strategies and to reconsider making them a little more fair and equitable across the board, not just with regards to the US. And, if it's one positive thing that'll come out of this, is that I think Trump is forcing this discussion, which is not necessarily altogether a bad thing. No one denies that imposing these tariffs is going to have a negative feedback loop into the US economy, and people can lament the fact that he's bullying his way around international political agendas and all of that sort of stuff. And that might all be true, but in the end, all we really care about is trying to figure out what the ultimate implication is going to be, and how to navigate that. And that for me is the more interesting thing. So, we've got to be aware that there's likely to be a phase of volatility, stock market sell-offs, which are going to raise levels of risk aversion. It'll probably prompt a very strong reaction by the central banks. And I've said this to the team, and I've said this to many clients. If we start to see the likes of the Federal Reserve and other central banks opening up the monetary taps in a form of quantitative easing once more to help ease the correction in financial markets, that is a wonderful buying opportunity at slightly more depressed stock market levels, and I think that's opportunity rather than a threat. So over the longer term, I don't think that it's just one way traffic down. There are going to be natural responses from the central banks as well as governments to try and avert a major downturn. And I think the concerns are already there. The Federal Reserve has kind of hinted at that. Many other central banks have as well. The stock markets are starting to reflect it. And so ultimately that's going to generate a response, and that response is going to be supportive of a reversal of that downturn. So, you got to look at these things cyclically. You got to look through the current downturn, because what might pop out the other side is likely to be a little more pleasant than what we're dealing with at the moment. But there's no question that Trump has turned the economic world a little bit upside down. He's causing a lot of people to focus on what value really is and where value sits, and the fairness of international trade policy. So the combination of all of that is going to result in some big changes. In a way, I'm quietly looking forward to it, even though I know it's going to be tumultuous, just because I think what will come out of this on the other side is going to be a better understanding of international politics and international economics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so gird your loins is going to be a bumpy ride this week, but we will come out the other side. That's what matters. George, thank you very much, and we will catch up again next week then.
Thank you.